Welcome everyone to Wrasslin Raw!
You're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when Monday Night Raw was uncut, uncooked, and uncensored. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
Trick or treat, yeah!
Joe Gimateo.
Take a look at this guy. He's gone.
I'm Jason Bartlett. That's no relation to Rob Bartlett, and we're going to examine WWE history one episode of Raw at a time. But first, before we do that, we want to give a very special shout out to our listeners across the pond. We've had downloads in Ireland and England. Thank you very much for listening. As a English immigrant to the great nation of America, well, my ancestors at least, I'm besieged by these Italians on either side of me. It's good to know that I have some of my old country kinfolk getting my back here.
How do they say thank you in England?
They usually turn their nose up in the air and walk right past you.
That seems about right.
No, that's just a joke. I would imagine, since I've never been there before, that they would be very cool and buy you a beer and be like, yo, or oi, I think they say instead of yo, they say oi.
Take off their glove and slap you across the face, and I challenge you to a duel.
As you say that with a almost French accent, you know you're full of shit. So anyway, in this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be talking about the Raw that aired on October 31st. 1994. Ooh. It's a Halloween edition. Yeah, this Raw was recorded at the Burlington Memorial Auditorium in beautiful Burlington, Vermont, and features Vince McMahon and the Macho Man Randy Savage on commentary. Are you guys ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yes.
Excellent. So, because of the holiday, it is Halloween, we're going to get a spooky graveyard scene intro with goblins running around in the mist and all kinds of crazy shit happening. And we get a voiceover from Vince. Halloween, a night of costumes, pranks, and ghosts. Bob Backlund, a man that has been haunted by ghosts for years, snapped when his worst fears caught up with him. His dark side has become unmasked. And like Dr. Jekyll, Bob Backlund has been transformed into a fiend. One man has stepped forward to meet the monster tonight. Lex Luger will face Bob Backlund on Monday Night Raw. Yeah.
It's weird that he said that because right now they're doing the Fiend gimmick. It's very, very odd. Yeah. Well, kind of wonder if he had that idea back in 94.
And isn't IRS Bray Wyatt's daddy?
Yes. Yes, he is.
So we've got IRS getting funky in the graveyard here and Vince talking about a fiend. We'll get to that later. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but
I like this intro with the him yelling Monday Night Raw right into the.
And you got to make sure you get the Vince cadence down. The Monday Night Raw.
the business version.
I had to, whenever I was doing my notes here, I had to do bold capitalization for certain words to know when to emphasize them, like Dr. Jekyll. And fiend. But our amazing intro that we get here gets into the music, and then it's going to take us straight into our first match. Lex Luger defeats Bob Backlund by DQ in 10 minutes even. So, the red, white, and blue Lex Luger is here. And there's a significantly better light show happening for him. The crowd is blacked out, so we can't see that nobody is excited and that the noise is being pumped in. Like last week, the fireworks are deafening, and the people in the venue absolutely must be deaf. We get an introduction to little Matilda, who's going to be waving the red, white, and blue for Lex Luger tonight. She's been decked out in the red, white, and blue everything. Shirt, undershirt by the looks of things, like a high collar shirt under the t-shirt, the hat. Hopefully she's getting paid for this endorsement deal, because that's the only way I would be seen in public in that get up, 94 or not.
Who was that, by the way?
I think it was just some random preteen girl that they pulled out of the, yeah. I mean,
I didn't know if that was she was like an actress or something, or like, I didn't understand what was going on there.
They just called her Matilda.
Nicole Matilda, I think, is what they said her name was.
Is it? Oh, I didn't hear that.
I think it was Nicole Matilda, yeah.
My ears were still ringing from the fireworks.
Yeah, you were deaf and on fire.
Red, white, and blue.
A red, white, and blue ball of pain.
No Rockets Red Glare comment this week.
I think he's finally realized that maybe he had like, what's that called whenever welders look at the fire too long? They get, blinded. They get the sunspots in their eyes. I think he's been staring at the fireworks for too long. He couldn't tell their colors anymore, so he was just calling them all red. We get the question, can Bob Backlund put the crossface chicken wing on this performer? God, I hope so. Bob Backlund enters the ring and does his chicken walk all around the ring. And since Ryan gave us that explanation of the chicken walk, what was that, 2 weeks ago now? I have to say it does enhance my appreciation for Bob Backlund every time he does it. Because now I'm like looking for it, and I'm trying to look for the stupid little things that made me assume that he had early onset dementia, but now is more indicative of like the gimmick.
I also think it shows, like, since Lex Luger makes fun of Bob Backlund for doing his chicken walk, I think that shows that Lex Luger was never an actual wrestler, because he had no clue what it was.
Yeah. We'll get to that, though. We're getting just a touch ahead of ourselves. So the bell rings, and Lex takes Backlund down in an arm drag takedown. Bob oversells heavily, and his surprise, I think, is as genuine as mine, because that takedown was surprisingly tight. I will give credit where credit is due. That was a pretty good takedown. Here is where Lex Luger mocks Bob Backlund with his own chicken walk, and I have to note here that it is an extremely poor chicken walk in comparison to Backlund's. And this is confusing to me, because I was pretty sure Luger had an 8.3 GPA in Olympic wrestling. So I'm a little confused. We get another arm drag and then a pair of leg drags. And I don't think that Luger knows any other kinds of takedown. But to his credit, again, he does pretty decent with these to start the match. But here's where things start to go downhill a little bit. We're going to spend some time circling each other for a while. We're going to pace the ring in a circle and eye each other like strange cats in the night.
Sizing each other up.
Yeah. Lex trying to figure out, like, what else can I do here? I already did the arm bar and the leg takedown. Lex makes an attempt to ride Backlund. I think, Ryan, that's the correct wrestling term there.
Yeah.
There's an attempt to get like it looks like a male dog is mounting a female dog kind of thing going on.
Yeah, that would be considered riding. Yeah, that's the correct term.
Okay. Doggy style. Okay, so there's a clear attempt to make this look like a real wrestling match here. There's a lot of mat work involving holds, and I found it funny that Luger has never attempted to wrestle like this before. He must have been hiding this ability all along, and that must be why he had a 14.2 GPA in strategy. There's going to be more stalling as they circle each other. Backlund doesn't look good with the working wrestling moves. Whenever they're doing these little exchanges of real wrestling moves, Backlund actually doesn't look that bad. I mean, I would hope not. He was a former legit state champion, but whenever we get to the working moves, he's just not, I don't know, it's kind of glaring that he's not as practiced at those. Backlund stalls the match for Lex with an arm twisting hold, so we don't see that Lex cannot wrestle. Backlund appears to be toying with him. He goes for the chicken wing, and Luger scrambles out of Backlund's clutches, terrified of the close call he just had with death. And Backlund lands a non-collegiate belly-to-back suplex on Luger. And then we go back into the armbar, and then a nice slam as the match continues to stall Luger's involvement. We get a really creepy view of Tatanka peeping through the entryway curtains as we cut to a commercial. This was like, I don't even know what the hell to call it. This was like stalker thinking about stabbing you, kind of creepy.
Leering.
Yeah, leering is a great word for it. We come back, and it looks like the stalling holds have continued. Backlund has Luger in a bear hug. There's another attempt at the chicken wing, and Luger frantically hits the ropes to get a release. He does not want to get stuck in that chicken wing. He's terrified of it. We go back to stalling with a bear hug hold. Luger breaks the hold and then rallies and wastes every opportunity to hit Backlund with the bionic forearm. And just as I was writing this note about wasting opportunities to hit Backlund with the bionic forearm, Vince wonders out loud if Luger is going to hit Backlund with the forearm or get him in the Rebel Rack. Luger slams Backlund and is then distracted by Tatanka at the apron. So this gives Backlund the opportunity to put on the chicken wing, full-blown chicken wing on Lex Luger. Luger is unable to escape it, and soon Backlund takes Luger to the mat with it still locked in. In a move that must have been a disappointment to Native Americans worldwide, Tatanka gets in the ring and starts laying kicks in on Luger before Luger can tap out. The ref rings the bell, and thus Luger wins this match by disqualification. But this isn't over yet, folks. Backlund won't release the hold while Tatanka keeps beating Luger. There are a half dozen officials in the ring to save Luger, one of which is definitely Jerry Briscoe, and I'm pretty sure one of the ones next to him was Pat Patterson. They finally get Backlund off, but Tatanka continues the beatdown. Once they get Tatanka off Luger, then Backlund comes back and puts the chicken wing back on him. And while it's still locked in, Savage is getting really agitated with the situation over at ringside and decides that it's time to throw off the headset and jump into the ring in an effort to save Lex Luger. Savage is punching the shit out of Backlund, eventually gets him off and chases him out of the ring. Backlund is last seen crawling up the entryway. Vince wonders to the audience if the Macho Man is going to get fined or suspended for these actions. After all, he's not supposed to be in the ring. I'm assuming that the final word on that is going to rest with the most worthless name in television, President Jack Tunney. Vince hopes the injuries to Luger are not anything permanent. I disagree and hope that they are career-ending. Ryan, please get us started on this match.
To start things out, I have to start with Macho Man. I think he says this while Lex is still making his way to the ring, but he mentions that since it's Halloween, that you'll recognize Bob Backlund because he'll be the one with the Howdy Doody mask on. So we've been calling him Howdy Doody here for a few weeks now, and now Macho Man follows it up. So that was pretty great. Towards the beginning, when Lex is making fun of Bob Backlund's chicken walk, I also liked Vince mentioning about how Bob doesn't like being made fun of, and Macho says, well, he's doing it to himself. Which is true. It's very true. As far as how some of the things in this match went, Lex Luger kind of just looked like your standard Lex Luger. I had to note at one point he was doing these arm leg sweeps on Backlund, and they looked especially weak. I had to point that out because I was just watching Lex try and pull these off and was like, why are these so slow? But I guess we should get used to that with Lex Luger. There were a few good tidbits out of commentary in this match too. We get Macho Man making fun of how white Bob Backlund is because he is pale. He says maybe he saw a ghost. And I mean, especially next to Lex Luger, who's like about 20 shades darker. He lives in a tanning booth. So next to Bob Backlund, there was a pretty stark difference there. This is to kind of tie into what you were saying last week, Bartlett. You were wondering if Bob Backlund's misuse of his fancy $20 words were him actually just misusing them or supposed to be part of his gimmick. And Vince either tries to cover up for it here, saying that he's misusing it, or in fact, it is part of the gimmick. So we get a little bit of an answer here. The other thing, towards the end of the match, I was scratching my head kind of like Vince was when Macho Man has like an existential crisis and he starts he starts wondering like if Bob Backlund or any of us actually exist, and is Lex Luger really in there by himself? And Vince just is like, did you have too much candy tonight, Macho? And then you had there was a very long bear hug and the crowd started chanting USA, USA. Because of Joe mentioning about the sound being pumped in, I made a distinct effort to look at the crowd, and there were like 2 people that I could see actually chanting. So I think that was pumped in.
Yep.
There was a spot where Bob kind of missed the move very badly. Do you remember that? He like dove face first. No one was there. He had a real Heidi Lee Morgan moment.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the very last thing I'm just going to end on, it was fantastic to see Lex Luger get put in the crossface chicken wing and start flailing around like Joe's dad, Louis G. and Frito. I loved it, especially when he came back in and put it back on him.
Yes.
Fantastic.
It was mentioned on Saturday, 2 days before this, I believe, that Backlund attacked Bret Hart with the chicken wing at a house show, I think, correct?
Yes.
I think they mentioned that because they were showing footage from something. I didn't know what it was. I was assuming that's what it was. So they're still building up, obviously, the Bret Hart match with Bob Backlund. No music at all for Howdy Doody. Like, he just comes in. This guy's going to be a champion. He has no music. He just comes into the ring. I don't hate Bob Backlund here. I just hate the push that he's getting. I've said that before. His facials are great in the ring, but he's just not he's not champion worthy here. I don't understand. Still, there's a lot of stalling in this match with Backlund just putting several holds on Luger, wrist locks, and other basic wrestling holds, which none of this is believable to me because I don't believe that this roided out freak who can bench press like 4,000 pounds can't break these holds. And I'm just wondering that to myself the whole time that's taking place. But Bartlett, you mentioned a suplex by Backlund. Luger looked like he dead weighted him because it looked pretty sloppy.
Yeah.
And, you could tell that Luger wasn't flexing his knees or anything. Like, he just dead weighted him, it seemed like.
I'd expect nothing less from Luger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's a shitty wrestler and he may have been tired at that point. And that's sort of brings me to my next point here with the type of look that Luger has. Maybe it would have been a better approach to sort of use him as like an Ultimate Warrior type or like a Goldberg, where he's just this power freak, and maybe just have his matches last like 5 minutes. I don't know, like, because he can't wrestle. He can't.
And like Bartlett has mentioned before, I think he was much better as a heel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So, yeah, it would have made more sense then to have him be like an Ultimate Warrior type worker and be a heel. It would have made more sense. A couple other quick notes. The crowd, Ryan, you mentioned the USA pumping. I noticed after Macho came in, they were chanting Macho, Macho. You could visually see the fans saying this, but you couldn't hear it. You just heard just regular crowd noise, but they were visibly chanting Macho, and you couldn't hear it.
During that point, I really loved that one poster that girl held up. It was just such a fantastically 90s Macho Man poster.
Yeah.
I want that poster. It's great.
One last Macho Man point. In my opinion, well, he cuts a great promo after when they come back. He's pissed off about Bob Backlund. It was like old school style Randy Savage. In my opinion, like I know The Rock gets a lot of credit. A lot of people think The Rock is the best ever at promos, but in my opinion, it's Randy Savage.
Mm-hmm. And it was kind of sad when the Macho Man started saying how it's hard to sit in this chair, knowing what the future is going to hold next week.
Right.
So speaking of, our next segment that we go into is just going to be a brief promo at ringside after the kerfuffle in the ring there. Vince is asking the Macho Man, what was it like in there, Randy Savage? It's hard to sit in this chair. I'm telling you, Dunny. Backlund, you're out of line. And again, since we know what's going to be happening, the promo itself was a lot longer than that. I didn't want to write it down and have it in my notes here and then mangle it and not do it any justice. Suffice to say, Joe's absolutely right. It's a great promo. It's a great old school promo. It's a great Macho Man promo. But the undercurrent of this promo is Macho Man Randy Savage meant every word of it if you just replace Jack Tunney with Vince McMahon and keeping him in the chair, keeping him at ringside. And I think that's what, I mean, they say that promos and characters in general are normal life and real life feelings turned up to 11. And it's kind of legendary how frustrated the Macho Man was sitting at ringside, even though he was great on commentary. I love listening to Macho Man. There's very few people that could take the place of Bobby the Brain Heenan in this equation, or at least fill the gap that he left whenever he left. Macho Man certainly did, and knowing what's going to happen, it was kind of sad listening to this. Even though it was a great promo, it's kind of sad hearing it. Backlund, you're out of line.
Let's think back to the stint when Macho wasn't, when he was supposedly suspended because he attacked Crush. Do you remember how terrible most of those commentary Raws were?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, except for Bash and Booger.
True.
Yeah, Bash and Booger was a good one, yeah. But yeah, Harvey Whippleman, Ted DiBiase, random guys. It just wasn't very good.
After this promo, we're going to get a commercial. Heavy duty Mabel. Heavyweight Yokozuna. Over 1,000 pounds in the ring. Mabel versus Yokozuna this Sunday on the Action Zone. And I actually wouldn't mind seeing that. I know we bitch about the big guys, Mabel and Yokozuna and the kind of matches they have. But it kind of seems like it would be just enough of a car wreck of a match to see who wins the Heart Attack on the Heart Attack tour. I don't know about you guys, but I thought that would be a kind of a cool match to see.
Or it could be the most boring match in the world.
Yeah, this preview made me want to go eat a salad.
Well, after this commercial, we're going to come back to Raw, and we're going to be going straight into our next match. The 1-2-3 Kid defeats Tony DeVito by pinfall in 3 minutes and 16 seconds. The 1-2-3 Kid comes out. Tony DeVito is already waiting for him in the ring. I still love the 1-2-3 Kid's music. There's something that's just very synth funky about it. I don't know of a better way else to describe it. It's not really regular funky because it sounds like somebody made his music on, the cheap little Casio keyboard that I used to have as a kid, but it's still done well enough to sound pretty damn funky. It's enjoyable. I distinctly noted that his mullet is getting really fluffy here. I think he had it permed recently. He was in full-blown perm mullet territory.
My theory here was he was just teaming up with the bad guy, so he was deciding to up his Jerry curl game.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's my theory.
He saw some of those white middle-aged women creaming their jeans at ringside.
He wanted to get himself some of that.
So while the guys are in the ring kind of, hopping around, getting warmed up, we're going to cut to commercial. When we come back, the match gets started. The bell is rung. The competitors look about even in height, but I think the 1-2-3 Kid is outweighed here by a good 40 pounds. The Macho Man is still pretty red-assed about the whole Backlund situation. He's blaming Jack Tunney for it. and mentions it repeatedly. Whenever the 1-2-3 Kid does something to Tony DeVito, and by something I mean, a hold, an attempted takedown, a lockup, you name it, DeVito complains about the different things that the 1-2-3 Kid is supposedly doing, to the referee, grabbing his tights, grabbing his hair. He was being a fairly decent heel enhancement talent here, just constantly bitching to the ref about things. The 1-2-3 Kid is working pretty well here too. He gets a lot of good kicks and martial arts moves in here. And then he hits DeVito with a really good suplex that looks impressive given the size difference between the two of them. The 1-2-3 Kid throws DeVito off the ropes, hits him with a flying, spinning heel kick, body slams him. This inspires Vince to comment that it's impressive because of Tony DeVito's weight. And then the 1-2-3 Kid goes to the top rope for a high-risk maneuver. He lands the Seton bomb, gets the 1-2-3 for the pinfall and the victory. Since the very beginning of the match, Savage has only spoken during the entire match to bitch about Bob Backlund. And like I mentioned before, some of the things that he's saying seem like they've been directed more at Vince than Jack Tunney. Especially the comments about being stuck at ringside and not being allowed to wrestle. Joe, please get us going on this match.
Well, the 1-2-3 Kid is another one of those guys that I like watching now. Again, I'm gaining a lot of respect for him, more so now than I did back then, just because I didn't know very much, but very highly skilled in the ring for a smaller guy. One thing I noticed, I couldn't tell what the symbol was on his tights. I don't know if you guys ever cared to notice that. It almost looks like a Harley Davidson symbol a little bit.
I mean, I know the 1-2-3, but I don't.
Yeah, the 1-2-3, but then there's like it's almost like he has a logo on his tights. So I tried to look and see what it was. I think it just says the 1-2-3 Kid on it. It looks dangerously close to a Harley Davidson logo. That was just something I picked up here in this one. DeVito, he almost looked like a young Big Show in the face.
Oh, wow. Good call.
A little bit. Like when he was in WCW as the Giant. I don't know. I thought DeVito was decent, but he looked like he was going to snap the ropes every time he hit him. He hit the ropes like so hard and slow. And like it was like they were snapping back all the way. The other note I have here is the Kid hits the top rope and jumps off and just makes it look fucking effortless. I mean, a lot of times you notice, I don't know if it's guys just working, but when they hit the top rope like that, they usually take a second to get their balance. I would assume it's a little bit of both, that they really are doing that and that they're, making it look like it's a little bit of a struggle, but he hits the top rope, jumps off like it's nothing. So I was pretty impressed by that.
As you both have already kind of talked about, the 1-2-3 Kid is impressive in this match, as he's been since he came into the WWF. He has taken the crowd by surprise here and has become a fan favorite. And it's pretty evident why when he gets in the ring. And to top it off, former Jobber of the Week here, Tony DeVito, does a good job for him in here. They have a pretty solid match together. Everything looks pretty fluid. There's nothing that looks, there's no ugly moves here. All in all, it was a very strong jobber match, the classic jobber match that you get in this era. The one thing to mention as far as you were saying how Macho Man Bartlett talked about Bob Backlund through most of it. And some of it, I think you are absolutely correct, was directed towards Vince. But there was this one mention that I wondered, it must have been a predetermined lead-in. He brings up that the 1-2-3 Kid and Alundra Blaze have been skydiving together and that Macho would like to skydive on the Bob Backlund's head. And yeah, and that leads into Vince talking about the fact that article was in the Raw magazine. So he does a quick little push for the Raw magazine that the 1-2-3 Kid and Alundra Blaze skydiving must have been in the most recent episode. So that must have been a little bit predetermined there. Outside of that, there's not a ton more to talk about. Both you guys kind of covered. It's a shorter match, but in all, I'm pretty satisfied with it. I think it's what you ask for out of a star jobber match. I liked it.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with both of you guys on this one. And I just wanted to add that as a kind of piggybacking off of what you said, Joe, about gaining this newfound appreciation for the 1-2-3 Kid. I liked him back whenever I was a kid, back in the day, whenever we were watching this as it was happening. But it wasn't in any kind of way because, like, I didn't appreciate him because of his skill. I appreciated him because he was a kid, to me at least. He was smaller. He was just all around kind of scrawnier and younger looking. And yeah, exactly. It was very cool to see somebody that was called a kid and looked like a kid in there going toe to toe with some of these guys. Now, as an adult, with hindsight, going back and rewatching this, he was really good. I can't wait to get to the end of the year to talk about the 1-2-3 Kid Bret Hart match from Monday Night Raw, one of our current contenders for the match of the year. And I mean, I won't really get into it here, but I can't put that match over enough. And I think that, like you said, Ryan, this was a fantastic example of what a superstar jobber match is. It was, what I say, 3 minutes and 16 seconds. Yeah. 3:16, and just skillful. It was good. It wasn't too short, wasn't too long. Everybody was keeping things mostly clean and drawn up tight, and it was entertaining. I was not disappointed in this at all from either wrestler in the ring. So,
and like kind of what you both were saying there, as a kid, I liked the 1-2-3 Kid. I enjoyed him, but as an adult, I respect him.
Yeah. So after this match, we are going to get another Survivor Series report from Todd Pettingil. Uh-oh. It looks like we're heading out west. Strap it up, folks. We're ready to go. And then we get the same CGI sequence that we had last week. We go through the various desert scenes, and we get to Todd Pettingil, and he looks absolutely ridiculous in a purple and black Harlequin button-down shirt with white fucking buttons under a purple blazer. Who the fuck dressed this guy?
He almost looks like some shitty, like, Batman character.
Yeah.
I have a confession.
You had one of those shirts, didn't you?
I did. In like 4th grade, I took my school photo in a shirt very similar to Todd's two-tone shirt.
Oh, God.
It was a different time back then.
It was.
All right, well, listen, I mean, I know I'm not the standard bearer of fashion or anything, but even in October of 1994, when I was 11 years old, I could have told you that this outfit looked ridiculous.
Okay, I was in 4th grade, so I wouldn't have been 11.
I mean, yeah, you were a child, and Todd is an adult and should know better. And he's also on TV.
I'm not blaming you, Ryan.
And that would have been closer to like 90, 91.
I'm not blaming you for this, Ryan. You were a child at the whim of your parents, so you didn't go out and choose that shirt. I'm not blaming you. This motherfucker did, or at least he let somebody dress him in it. So, all right, I'm gonna move it along from there because I can't stand looking at him. Apparently, somebody stole Pettingil's spanky Little Rascals lawn jockey. He wants it returned.
He caught him on the security cam.
Yeah. Fucking dick. We're 3 weeks out from Survivor Series, and because I am trying to be more positive, I don't want to let down our number one fan and get too mired in negativity. I do want to give him a positive compliment here. I give Todd Pettingil absolute credit for his clear enunciation during his promos and speaking. He never garbles a word, and that's something that I wish I could do. So now that that's out of my system, we are going to get back to his bullshit, and he's going to run the entire card of the upcoming Survivor Series pay-per-view for us, and he says it's more heart-stopping than the new NBC series ER.
Which I gotta give him some credit for that, too, because, I mean, ER had premiered like a month before this, and it ran for, like 15 seasons or something like that? I mean...
Yeah.
And if we remember, a month before this is really just a week, because we are now in the third recording on the same week here. So
So yeah, a little bit of a positive note there for Todd Pettingil. Good call on the ER.
We're going to cap it with a negative here because it's a failed opportunity to pitch the Heart Attack Tour. More heart-stopping. He said the Survivor Series is going to be heart-stopping. More heart-stopping than what? Oh, we're part of the Heart Attack Tour. We've been hearing about it every fucking week. But you know what? You're right. It was wise to bring up ER because it did wind up being a pretty big deal. But
it was huge.
A behemoth of a show. At Survivor Series 1994, we're going to have a championship match. Bret Hart will defend the title against Bob Backlund, and it is going to be a submission match. Of course, it wouldn't be anything other than that. Also, we're going to have the ultimate casket match between Undertaker and Yokozuna. Pettingil repeats casket obnoxiously as if he's talking straight to Yokozuna. Casket, casket, casket. The WWF has hired a special guest referee to make sure that the events of the Royal Rumble aren't repeated. This is in reference to...
troubleshooting referee.
You're exactly right. Pardon me. A special troubleshooting referee. So just a quick reminder of the events of the Royal Rumble earlier this year. I can't remember what month it is. January, I think. We had the very first casket match, which The Undertaker was very soundly winning until it was 10 guys, wasn't it? Like, that's not an exaggeration.
It was
10 people.
Yeah.
10 guys came out from the back, among them Bam Bam Bigelow. I want to say IRS was maybe one of them. I can't remember, but there were 10
Crush.
guys. Yeah. Crush, yep. Evil Crush was one of them.
Jeff Jarrett, Diesel, like basically every heel that was in the locker room.
Yeah. Yeah, they came out and basically gave Yokozuna the assist in the first casket match, helping him get the Undertaker into it and holding it shut so that the bell could be rung and the match could be declared over. But we're not going to have any of these shenanigans this year or this Survivor Series because of the special guest troubleshooting referee, Walker, Texas Ranger, the one and only Chuck Norris, everybody. He's going to be laying out some roundhouse kicks to a motherfucker that wants to put the Undertaker in a casket.
Don't fuck with Chuck.
Also, we're going to have the usual 5-man tag elimination matches for Survivor Series, and he announces the full teams here. So, Guts and Glory, comprised of Lex Luger, the Smoking Guns, Adam Bomb, and Big Ol' Mabel, will take on the $1 Million Team, Bam Bam Bigelow, King Kong Bundy, Tatanka, and Jim Cornette's Heavenly Bodies for some reason. The second elimination match is the Bad Guys, Razor Ramon, the Head Shrinkers, Fatu and Sion, the 1-2-3 Kid, and the British Bulldog, versus the Teamsters, Diesel and Shawn Michaels, Double J Jeff Jarrett, Owen Hart, and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And finally, Clowns Are Us, Doink, Dink, Wink, and Pink, versus the Royal Family, Jerry the King Lawler, Queasy, Sleazy, and Cheesy. Of course, Pettingil loves the midget match. Call your local cable provider and order right this second. Still to come tonight, we've got King Kong Bundy, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and King's Court with the man that controls the souls of the universe, The Undertaker. So before we move on, I just wanted to talk to you guys about this. Ryan, what do you think of the Survivor Series match card so far with what's been announced here?
I'm not sure I care about it yet, especially with the Lex Luger team. And the only thing I'm really caring about so far is the casket match. As a huge Undertaker fan and watching all these promos week after week, I'm really looking forward to the casket match. But the rest of these matches, I'm not sure I care about.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, and I think the Clowns Are Us that whole thing is kind of bringing the show down anyway, regardless of what they announce. But I do like the Chuck Norris appearance. I think that was a pretty big get for them at that time because Walker was a huge show, and it was on for about a year at this point. So I like that a lot. And I'm with Ryan too. With the Undertaker Yokozuna match buildup has been really good. So looking forward to that, and obviously having Chuck Norris there. I don't know why they didn't just call him refer to him as like a special guest security guard,
enforcer,
rather than
ref, or
troubleshooting.
whatever.
Yeah, enforcer instead of troubleshooting referee. Like I don't get that, but kind of a lame announcement too, having it come from Todd Pettingil. It would have been cooler to maybe have him show up on Raw or something, but
I think we might be a few years away from something big like that.
Yeah, but just kind of a lame announcement. But so far, I think that's probably like the most exciting celebrity appearance that we've seen since we started watching this, January 93.
I'm going to be the outlier on this one. I don't really care much about the casket match. I do agree that it has been a good build up to it, but I have a hard time, and I'm going to go on the record right now as saying I have never seen Survivor Series 1994. I've never watched it. So whenever we get to it and whenever we do our breakdowns of it here and, for the podcast, it's going to be the first time I've ever seen it. Just going into it, knowing what I know about the lead up and about the people that are going to be in it, it's Yokozuna. I can't get excited about Yokozuna no matter what. Like I said, I give full props to the build up because the build up has been great. Anything involving The Undertaker and Paul Bearer is great. But because it's Yokozuna, I can't feel excited about it. I am excited about the Bret Hart Bob Backlund match. I like matches where the competitors are tight in their moves and technically skilled and evenly sized. I don't like the squash matches with the giant versus the midget and that kind of thing. Bret Hart and Bob Backlund are about the same size, about the same weight class, give or take. Bret Hart's a little more physically fit than Bob Backlund is, but they both have the potential to be highly technical in the match. And again, I've never seen Survivor Series 94, so it might be a total shit stain of a match. I don't know, but that is something that I am actually looking forward to. As far as the 5-man things, that's the one thing, the whole reason that they have a Survivor Series are these 5-man tag elimination matches. I've never liked them. They're such a gimmick match that they don't interest me at all. But again, I've never seen this Survivor Series, so it might turn out to be good. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. After this special Survivor Series report, we're going to have video clips from this past Saturday. There was a WWF charity softball game with the WWF Superstars versus the Union Recreational Women's All-Stars of Union, New Jersey softball team. Of course, the women lost to the Superstars. I did not see Sid in attendance. I was hoping that he might have tried to sneak in as a ringer on the women's team just to get some practice in, but no dice. We're going to cut to a commercial, and then that's going to segue us straight into our next match. King Kong Bundy defeats Bert Centeno by pinfall in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. This is going to be one of the matches I was just talking about, with one guy drastically outsizing the other guy. And I mean, I know it's a squash match. This isn't superstar versus superstar or anything, but it just, I don't know. I never liked these kind of matches. Whenever we come back from commercial, everybody's already in the ring. Savage says Bundy could have been the backstop at that softball tournament. I thought that was pretty funny because he does. He looks like a big rubber mat that could be laid against a chain link fence. Monday Night Raw, brought to you by Double Mint Gum. Fresh breath for you, fresh breath for you-know-who. Certainly isn't Bert Centeno. Bert Centeno looks like he hasn't touched a drop of mouthwash or breath-freshening gum in his entire life. He's dwarfed by King Kong Bundy. Before we get into the action, Bundy keeps calling everybody boy. He's telling someone in the crowd, "Shut your mouth, boy," and yelling at Bert Centeno, "Come on, boy." Centeno is particularly weak here once we get into the action. He's not selling very well. He looks ridiculous with this mullet that's really high cut on the sides, almost to the point of being a mohawk. It's so high cut. Vince talks some more about Mike Zitka and Greg Gumball. He's still very impressed with himself and the hilarity of the play on names there. Bundy gets the 5 count with a knee on Centeno, then picks Bert Centeno up and just chucks him out of the ring. And that's it. It was a squash match. Joe, what did you think of this stunning display of power from King Kong Bundy?
Take a look at Bundy. He's a mammoth.
He's here.
Just the whole time. The whole time. I don't know. This is this is your standard jobber match, like you said. But where are they going with Bundy? Nobody knows. And I don't think anybody really cares about him. And this is a guy that had a feud with Hulk Hogan. But yeah, just nobody cares about him anymore. The only other note I have is that when Bundy throws Centeno out of the ring after the match, I thought Centeno did a pretty good job there of enhancing and just tossing himself out of the ring. That was pretty funny. I got a little laugh out of that.
Yeah, to me, this was a pretty sad match. Earlier in the night, we had what I would consider as your quintessential enhancement or jobber match. You had the 1-2-3 Kid, a great superstar with a lot of talent, against Tony DeVito, a jobber with adequate talent to make the superstar look good. This match was none of that. We had King Kong Bundy, who's just slow and mammoth in the ring. And we had Bert Centeno, who was okay at times, but for the most part, yeah, not a very good jobber. So this match was very, very forgettable. Not a lot to talk about. Useless moves, boring. And then at the end, you have King Kong Bundy. He wants his 5 count. He was very, very adamant about that for
5.
Yes. For about 5 minutes after the match, he went around the ring just telling everyone 5, 5, 5.
I liked the very first one, whenever he first puts his knee on Centeno and the ref does the 1-2-3, and then Bundy throws up the hand and spreads the fingers wide, and he looks straight at the camera and he goes, 5.
Sure, that's the gimmick. That's fine, but
he's here.
Yeah, no. He definitely beat it to death. I'm going to just agree with both you guys on this entire match. The one thing that I want to especially agree with is, Joe, whenever you said about what are we doing with King Kong Bundy here? I think that's a fantastic question because, and I've mentioned it before, with the very creative promos that we had coming into King Kong Bundy's reappearance in the WWF, I was kind of excited about it. Not like, popping a chub excited, but excited enough to be looking forward to it a little bit. I don't really remember King Kong Bundy from the 80s. I mean, I know he was there and that's about it. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head any more than maybe 1 or 2 matches he had. But I was looking forward to just something different. Not fresh, because it wouldn't have been fresh, but just something different. And then his first match, he doesn't have his own music. We get to this, and it seems that the only different thing that he has going for him is 5. And it's lame as hell. So,
yeah, I mean, this is a guy that was once pretty well known, even outside the wrestling world, a little bit, just because he had a feud with Hulk Hogan. And anybody who feuded with Hulk Hogan in the 80s was pretty fairly well known, even outside of the wrestling world. But now he's 1994. He's basically just a parody of that character that he once was.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But we're going to let it go and move on to another IRS vignette from the graveyard. I'm liking these. I'm just going to throw that out there right up front. I am digging these. We start with a gravestone labeled John Doe, as in money, D-O-U-G-H, not a female deer, D-O-E, John Doe. IRS is tough talking the grave. So you thought just because you were 6 feet under, you wouldn't have to pay your taxes anymore. Well, you were wrong, because I knew last week when I thought you were a tax cheat, that I was right, and I was. You are a tax cheat. Well, you were. It seems, after reviewing your September 15th quarterly taxes, I've found a slight error. You see, I'm sure you and your whole family enjoyed your little girl's birthday dinner, but that birthday dinner wasn't tax deductible. You owe $121.37. So maybe if I repossess these fresh flowers, that will settle your debt. Wait a minute, though. I'm sure if you cheated once, you've cheated more than once. So maybe this requires further investigation from me, IRS. So remember, even after you're 6 feet under, you still have to pay your taxes. So after this, we're gonna be going into The Undertaker at King's Court. But before we do, Joe, as our resident auditing expert, how exactly could I get away with writing off my daughter's birthday dinner as a tax deduction? I do have 2 of them.
Well, first off, I doubt you would get an audit for $127. I think you'd be safe on that one. And also, you would have an extra day to do your September quarterly taxes, because I'm pretty sure they're due on September 16th. So, I don't know what Irwin's talking about here.
Punching holes, goddamn. That's why we have the professionals here on Wrasslin Raw, folks. We don't take no bullshit.
Right.
I also noticed that it felt very poorly acted by IRS here.
I agree.
Yeah, like much worse than many of these other vignettes have been. It really felt like he was reading the words off his fucking hand or something. That's the only thing I really had noted about this vignette.
I actually prefer the ones where he's like in the office with the adding machine and everything.
Well, you're both wrong. This was great. And I do agree that, I mean, he's really poorly going through this speech. I tried to express that in my rendition of it, but I still love it. This is great. This is the kind of shit that makes me like IRS.
You could call it bad acting, or really maybe it's good acting, because, you know, accountants and tax auditors are very
boring people.
Boring people. Yes.
Okay. We're going to go into our next segment, King's Court. So the King is going to welcome us to a very spooky edition of King's Court. He introduces The Undertaker and Paul Bearer. The lights go out, the bell tolls, and I'm actually really excited for King's Court for the first time in a long time. I love Paul Bearer here. He's being absolutely perfect in this, just with his facial expressions alone. Before he even says a word, before he even gets a chance to lay down his voice and like all that shit, the way that he reacts to the things that Jerry Lawler says is just priceless. I love it. Paul Bearer sets the urn down on the royal throne. Loved it. It was great.
The giant urn.
Yes. And in this episode of King's Court, Paul Bearer is going to be hawking the new WWF publication Tombstoned, a history of Undertaker matches. Take a look at this man, for example. He faced the Undertaker, and he's gone. I wasn't sure if I could get it up that high. That's what she said. Lawler understands that the Undertaker has gotten rid of many superstars, but we are talking about Yokozuna here. There's a sign in the audience that says Yokozuna wears diapers. Which I'm pretty sure I mentioned last week.
Which I thought was interesting because, yeah, you did mention that last week about like shitting his diapers or something. And
we've also mentioned about the influence that we have on the wrestling world.
Yeah, our words just reach back in time and direct all of this.
They're that powerful.
Yeah. If you're so confident about The Undertaker, why do you have Chuck Norris as a referee? We get a really disgusting close-up of Paul Bearer's face. He's absolutely glistening like a Christmas ham. They pass the mic to the Undertaker. There comes a time in everybody's life when they must be held accountable for their actions. Yokozuna, your time has come. Ryan, I knew you were going to have some good things to say about this, so I'm going to just step back. Please give it to us.
It was great. It starts with, the Undertaker making his slow, methodical march to the ring, and man, does he get an enormous pop. Yeah. I mean, this is no fake pumped in noise here, because you could just tell by the faces of the crowd. They are going crazy as soon as they mention the Undertaker's name. So, that's just great to see. I mean, he is just loved by the fans. Another great point that the fans go crazy for is the lights are still out, and Lawler asks for the lights to come on, and the Undertaker does his hand raise and the lights come on and everyone goes crazy. Yeah, I loved everything about Paul Bearer here. How can you not? He is the most beautiful person in the WWF right now. When he brings up the Tombstone magazine, just the facial reactions in his voice when he says, "Have you seen it?" And the way he just tilts his neck down and points. Just fucking great. The urn looked like the one from the fake Undertaker match that had the spotlight stuffed in it, because it was enormous. Yeah. I don't know what that was all about. Also, again, Chuck Norris got a huge pop by the fans too, just mentioning his name, and the crowd went crazy. So you could tell Chuck Norris is pretty loved right now too. And I'm just going to end it with saying this is probably one of the best King Courts we've had in months. Again, I understand I'm a complete asshole for the Undertaker. I mean, I love everything he does here. But let's be honest here. The King did exactly what you want out of a King Court. He came down here, he threw a couple insults towards the fans, and then boom, we got the Undertaker, Paul Bearer down here, and he pretty much shut up. Paul Bearer got on the mic and threw down some fantastic words. We got the Undertaker quickly saying, "Yokozuna, you're going to rest in peace." Bing, bang, bomb. We're done with King's Court. This is what it should be.
Yeah, I'm going to keep this really brief because everything about this was great. I just want to give credit to Jerry Lawler on this, because when Ryan, you mentioned the pop that the Undertaker got. Now, normally when you go to these shows, they tell you what the card is. I don't think the crowd knew this.
Yeah, they seem surprised.
Jerry Lawler. You guys have to rewatch this, because Jerry Lawler announces his guest as Yokozuna's opponent at Survivor Series, just like that. And there's this little kid up front with this amazing bowl cut who just totally just pops his ass off. Like, this kid just gets fucking insane up front, and it's great. And that's all I'm going to note, because I think you guys hit everything else, and everything about this is just great. Worth rewatching.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of you on this. As a bit of a side note, there has been some talk recently amongst the Wrasslin Raw crew of making up t-shirts, and I think that we've got a couple strong contenders here. I really like the idea of having an "asshole for the Undertaker" shirt. Just the words, "I'm an asshole for the Undertaker."
And Paul Bearer is the most beautiful man in wrestling.
Well, the other one I was going to suggest is maybe "pop your ass off." That was quite clever there, Joseph, popping his ass off.
You got to watch it again. I'm telling you, this kid goes fucking insane.
We're going to move it along here. We're going to have a brief segment. It's a Monday Night Raw commercial. The Family Feud started on the Action Zone, and it's going to bleed over onto Monday Night Raw. We're going to have Next week on Monday Night Raw, the Hitman and the British Bulldog versus Owen Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. It's kind of funny because yet again, we were talking about this. Ryan, I think you were talking about it not last week, but the week before, whenever we were talking about how kind of convoluted this whole, it started off with Owen and Brett, but then Jim Neidhart got involved, and then the British Bulldog got involved, and then it was the Bulldog versus Jim Neidhart. And just at one point, Ryan, you said that it would be great to have a tag team match, Hitman and the Bulldog versus Owen and the Anvil. And here you go. You get it.
I got my wish.
Our fingers reach deep into the industry to stimulate these ideas in the past. This Monday Night Raw commercial is going to lead us into the final match of the night. Jim the Anvil Neidhart defeats Tony Roy by submission in 4 minutes and 12 seconds. And Tony Roy is our Jobber of the Week. Take it, Ryan.
Thank you, Jason. Tony Roy is this week's jobber. I mean, just look at that mullet. How could he be anything other than a jobber, right? I mean, that balding mullet just screams jobber. And, as far as picking my jobber this week, Tony DeVito is a prior Jobber of the Week, so I couldn't pick him. So this week, I really picked Tony because of the Owen sunglass snapping. It's just such a fantastic viewing when someone gets snapped with those glasses that Tony Roy rose to the top today. So Tony Roy was born April 4th, 1970 in Nashua, New Hampshire. Throughout Tony's career, other than the name Tony Roy, he used the ring names Anton Roy and Antonio Roy, as well as Slade. A huge wrestling fan at an early age, Tony, 15 at the time, began lifting weights at the local YMCA to help pursue his dream of becoming a professional wrestler. Tony began his wrestling career in late 1987, training like so many other jobbers of this era at the Killer Kowalski Wrestling School. He would say that Walter Killer Kowalski was as much a mentor as he was a wrestling trainer to him, teaching him much about life as much as he did about wrestling. Tony has been quoted as saying Walter was exactly like the character Mickey from the movies Rocky. Tony made his WWF and in-ring debut in February of 1989. Him and partner George Scullin would be defeated by the Powers of Pain, a tag team made up of the Barbarian and the Warlord. Tony would spend the 1990s wrestling both as a jobber for the WWF and bouncing between various different independent promotions, most notably in 1991 and 92, where he feuded with fellow Killer Kowalski school student and future WWF star Triple H on the independent circuit. In 1997, Tony would leave the WWF and the world of wrestling until the early 2000s, when he would return to the independent circuit with a much more muscular physique and trading in the balding mullet for a clean-shaved head. He would wrestle predominantly with the New England-based promotion Big Time Wrestling, or BTW. On June 3rd, 2015, Tony would wrestle his last match for the BTW. Him and tag team partner Skellick Wagner Brown would be defeated by the team of Flex Armstrong and Scott Steiner. Currently, Tony resides in Chicago while training his brother-in-law in his transition from collegiate wrestling to professional wrestling.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Informative as always. Tony Roy. How about that?
Big time wrestling.
Yeah. BTW.
Scott Steiner was there.
That's like, it's tickling something in my head. Like I know something about that, but I can't put my finger on what it is. BTW. Maybe I'm thinking of BTO. I don't know. So, getting back to the match here. Owen Hart accompanies the Anvil to the ring where Tony Roy is already waiting. Jim Neidhart doesn't let any time waste as he starts laying into Tony Roy, and he's already blowing and puffing. That being said, the Anvil is looking good, though. When he does he does some power throws, he gets some pretty good distance out of Tony Roy, looking much better than he did the last time we saw the Anvil in the ring. Still not like perfect or anything, but much better than before. Owen is at ringside, and he's yelling, "That's what's going to happen to you, Bulldog, and to you, Brett, when we get our hands on you." Neidhart gets Tony Roy in a Tree of Woe type hang-up in the corner, with Tony Roy hanging head down facing the center of the ring. And his ankles are like tied up in the top rope.
I love this.
And while he's tied up like this, Neidhart draws the ref's attention with some arguing. And while the ref's attention is on Jim Neidhart, Owen chokes Tony Roy, still hanging upside down, while Owen is standing at the ring apron. I thought that this was especially cool. I just, it kind of really got me in the moment. I was imagining what it would be like to be strangled while you're hanging upside down with all the blood rushing to your head. And I kind of started to see what Michael Hutchins and David Carradine might have liked about it. I started to get a little intrigued.
It also really highlights just how great Owen is, because that wasn't a planned thing. It's like he just saw him hanging right in front of him and was like, I got to choke him here.
Yeah. Things like this make me wish that we had like I don't know what you would call it, but like a fly on the wall type of view on that, because we know that they're calling spots during this. And because they're professionals, we never see it. Well, I take that back. We very rarely see it, and we very rarely hear it. But I would have liked to have heard what Owen said to Tony Roy going into that. Like, "Hey man, I'm gonna fucking strangle you while you're hanging here. Just chill out and sell it." You know what I mean? Like, what did he say to prep Tony Roy for that? I would love to know that kind of thing. But getting back to the action, Owen lets go of the stranglehold and then yells into the camera, "British Bulldog, my brother Brett, when we get our hands on you next week, you're going to be hurting just like him." Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time. It's time for Randy Savage to do some promo copy for the USA Network. There's a sucker born every minute. Christopher Walken and Lorraine Bracco star in Scam. And then Vince makes him fucking repeat himself.
That's why Macho left.
Yeah, it is. I genuinely believe that. That's a big part of it. Just rubbing the salt in the wounds. Like, not only do you have to sit here, you have to fucking repeat yourself about Christopher Walken and Lorraine Bracco. Tony Roy is piss poor at selling some of these moves. That's the most I can say about him up to this point through this match. Savage says that Stargate was the #1 movie this weekend, and he predicts that the Hitman and the Bulldog are going to be the #1 tag team next weekend, which is, I don't know, just kind of a neat little timestamp on this whole thing, because I distinctly remember whenever Stargate came out and it was big at the box office, and I wanted to go see it,
I loved it.
Yeah, I'm a fan of the movie. I'm a fan of the first TV show. I never saw any of the second ones. SG-1 I was a fan of.
With MacGyver.
Yeah, absolutely. At the conclusion of this matchup, we find out that Vince is going to go talk to Lex Luger in the locker room. Savage says, "Somebody should. If Vince doesn't, Savage will." Vince, this is a little weird here. Vince says he thinks Savage should just stay right in that chair. And Savage replies with, "Everybody thinks I should stay in this chair." Vince says, "It's a nice chair." Savage says, "Yeah, but I'm tired of sitting in it." And again, pretty interesting chatter, considering what's going to happen in the future. Back in the ring, the Anvil is still kind of puffing and blowing, but not as bad as last time. Again, he seems to be getting back into better shape and better form here. Eventually, the Anvil locks in the camel clutch. Tony Roy submits. The ref rings the bell, and the match is over. We cut to commercial as it looks like through some signs in the crowd, because there's some people throw some signs up. It looks like the Anvil is going to be putting the camel clutch back onto Tony Roy. And this is where I start to get my hopes up just a teensy bit, just a tiny bit. And we go to commercial. We get a quick Slim Jim commercial. And when we come back, yes, the Anvil is still holding Tony Roy in the camel clutch, and Owen Hart is putting the Hitman glasses onto him. Thank Friar Ferguson for this. Owen puts the glasses onto Tony Roy. Owen turns to the camera, and just with this look of absolute gleeful joy, just the look of an excited young kid on Christmas morning. It was great. He says to the camera, "This first one is for you, Brett." And then he snaps the glasses on Tony Roy's face. "And here's one for the brother-in-law." And then another snap to the face. Oh, so beautiful. So, so beautiful. Joe, please talk about this match.
Well, first, Scam must have been a terrible movie because it doesn't even have a rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
You actually looked it up?
I looked it up. No rating. With this match, again, Owen steals the show for me. In my opinion, I think Owen is the best heel right now in the WWF. Maybe outside of Shawn Michaels, maybe, but we haven't really seen him very much. But I love every time Owen is out there, I am paying attention to what's happening. The choking in the corner was great. Of course, the glasses snapping. The only thing that bothered me about the glasses thing was that Vince didn't care at all about it. They just kept talking about getting an update on Lex Luger.
Almost like they weren't watching it.
Yeah. Vince refers to them, to Owen and Anvil, as two jamokis.
Yeah.
And I've always known that word to be pronounced jamoke. Not like it really matters because it's a slang word, but I thought that was funny. But yeah, that's all I have noted. Again, the Anvil is still using the Hart Foundation music, which is the same as Bret Hart.
See, I've always thought jamoke was the word that Michael Jackson says. Jamoka.
I always thought that was Shimona.
I don't know.
My points on this match, yeah, not a ton. You guys kind of covered a lot. It's a short match, and most of the entertainment we get is out of Owen and not anyone that's in the ring here. I did notice that the Anvil is continuing to scream, "Get up!" to his opponents. He really loves to scream, "Get up!" to them for whatever reason.
Like James Brown style? Or?
Get up!
Yeah, it's typically after he'll knock them down, and while they're like kind of rolling around, he'll start screaming for them to get up, like basically that they're a pussy because they can't get up after his hammering. I also noticed that Tony Roy, I've never seen someone give up so quick. The moment that the Anvil put on the camel clutch, the bell was going off and the ref said that he gave up. I mean, there was like no time in between. I thought that was funny. I also liked the giant heart sign that was blocking the entire end of the match.
Yeah.
We couldn't see anything that was going on. And then, of course, the sunglass snapping. Why I picked Tony Roy as the jobber of the week.
That poor soul.
Yeah, I've said everything in my breakdown that I wanted to say about this match. Good match. I mean, well, it was great for Owen. We'll put it that way. So on the heels of this match, we're going to cut to commercial again and then return for the final segment of the night.
What's that? I can't hear you.
Yeah, this was just, I don't know, piss poor everything.
Zencaster was recording this for them.
Oh, God, tossing grenades.
I have to say that you guys talked about Macho Man's promo earlier that kind of made you a little sad and depressed, but this is what made me sad and depressed because this is the last we're going to get from Macho Man in the WWF.
That's fucked up. See, I didn't even think in those terms. Watching this and doing my notes and then getting ready to go into this recording tonight, now that you've put it that way, yeah, this is extremely, extremely depressing, more so than it was before.
At least we got to hear a lot of siren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You could, I like how you could faintly hear Vince yelling.
Yeah.
In the background, like,
and the audio comes back just in time for it to not matter at all.
Yeah, this was piss poor.
So our listeners know what we're talking about here. We come back from the commercial and Macho is alone at ringside. And he's there to remind us first of the action in the upcoming weeks. Next week, Bret Hart and the British Bulldog versus Owen Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. But right now, Vince is going to be talking to Lex Luger in the locker room to check on those injuries. Meanwhile, the siren, the Raw siren, the one that we emulate in the opening of Wrasslin Raw here, woo, woo, woo. That siren is blaring over the audio, like really, really loud. Savage says a couple times, Vince, can you hear me? Vince, can you hear me? And it's clear that he can't, because whenever we get the visual, Vince is already talking to Luger in the video feed from the locker room, but we can't hear him because all we hear is that goddamn siren going off. Savage kind of gives us a little bit of a breakdown on the technical difficulties that they must be having, and then goes on to describe a little bit of the background of what's happening here, why Luger is silent yet pissed off, and why Luger has an ice pack on his shoulder, Bob Backlund and Tatanka and all that. And we end Raw with a shot of the Macho Man just sitting there looking at his monitor in profile. And then in the last 2 seconds, we get audio. Apparently Tatanka has attacked Lex Luger in the locker room. And we're going to fade to black on this. Yeah, that's it. This episode of Monday Night Raw is over. So, highlights and lowlights. Joe, why don't you start us off on that?
I will start with my highlight, which is two things here. The King's Court with The Undertaker and Paul Bearer from beginning to end was very entertaining. And, of course, the glasses snapping on that poor soul Tony Roy's face. And my low light, again, I have two of those. The King Kong Bundy stuff, I thought that was just, I don't know, that was filler.
5.
It's huge. We didn't need that. And then also Macho Man's last WWF moment we just discussed was a little sad, but he gave us some pretty good stuff in WCW after. Obviously, we won't be covering that on here, and like I said earlier too, I believe that Macho Man Randy Savage was the best promo guy of all time. Just my opinion.
So my highlights, actually both my highlights and lowlights are going to kind of mirror yours, Joe. So highlight is definitely a rare one for me. After bashing King's Court so many weeks in a row, it's my highlight this week. King's Court with the Taker. That's what we want out of King's Court. We get to just hear Paul Bearer talk on the mic for most of the court. So it's great. Highlight for me. It also does a really good job of reminding us with about the Yoko feud and the casket match, and that's going to be an important thing come Survivor Series. Low light, just like you, Joe, again, the King Kong Bundy match was it was piss poor. There was no silver lining to that match. It was just wall to wall shitty.
Wall to wall in that walking condominium.
Yes. Yeah. Mammoth huge. But I'm also going to note as a second low light, IRS's performance in that vignette, because it was really, really poor. So sorry.
Well, I am going to agree with both of you on my highlight. It's a 2 for King's Court. Like I said in my breakdown of it, without even saying a word, Paul Bearer is more entertaining in the first 3 seconds of him being in the ring and the first 3 seconds of King's Court. He is already more entertaining than just about every single King's Court we've had.
It's amazing how that character still holds up too. Like that's what's amazing.
Most beautiful man in the WWF.
And that gruesome close-up of his glistening Christmas ham face. The white pancake makeup on him.
Yes.
Tombstone. My other highlight is going to be the glasses snapping, and not just the glasses snapping, because that is great in and of itself, but Owen Hart's face going into that's something that I would recommend you guys and our listeners go back and just pause it, just right there whenever he's doing his little wind up going into it. He legit looks like a poor kid that has been given a big ass, brightly wrapped box on Christmas morning. That's the biggest present he's ever gotten in his entire life. He looks so goddamn happy to be in the position that he's in, about to snap these glasses on the face of that poor soul, Tony Roy. Like I said, just go back and pause it. The twinkle in his eye, the twinkle in his eye made me think of all of the wrestling podcasts that we've listened to amongst ourselves here. Two big ones in regard to Owen being Grilling JR with Conrad Thompson and Jim Ross, and Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard and Conrad Thompson, where everybody loved Owen Hart. According to these guys in the many different episodes that they've talked about him, everybody loved Owen Hart. He was one of the best ribbers, meaning that he loved to play jokes on people. And they always talk about him as though he had this childlike sense of mischief. And that is what you see on his face before the glasses snapping starts. It was kind of this moment for me whenever I was watching it, because all of those things that have been said about him on the different wrestling podcasts kind of just all rushed in on me at the same time, and I could see exactly what they were talking about. Just the childlike glee of mischief. It was so perfect for him. My low light, the whole Randy Savage thing. I can't split the low light with King Kong Bundy this week, because the Savage thing, even before Joe, you made it clear about this final segment, at the end of Raw. Even before that, the whole thing with Savage was just too brutal on my appreciation for what he's done, and I completely agree with you. Best promo in the history of wrestling, Savage. My personal favorite of them all is the cream of the crop promo. Absolute genius. I watch it repeatedly. My kids love it. My kids come down and watch it with me. It's fucking great. So all that being said, the end of Randy Savage in the WWF is my low light, as well as this fucking technical difficulty bullshit, and that final sad view of him in profile, just kind of looking at a monitor and not knowing what to say. I think that really sums it up.
And not just to mention losing the Macho Man, they're also losing such a great ambassador for the WWF. I mean, Think back to all of the events that the Macho Man has involved himself, the Columbus Day parades, the softball games. I mean, he's just such a team player and such a great promoter of the brand. It's going to be hard to replace him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame they couldn't come up with an amicable split like they did with Ric Flair in early '93, because Flair had a great exit.
Yeah.
Like, they had a 5-star match with Mr. Perfect, and he was gone. It's a shame they couldn't do something like that with Macho Man. So yeah, pretty sad.
Well, with that all being said, we are going to kick it over to Joe here. Joe, do you have any contemporary wrestling news on and around October 31st, 1994?
I do, and looking around on the Observer at this time, I thought I would run into some Macho Man news, but there was nothing there, so I'm assuming maybe he covers it the following week. But the first note that I have here is that we talked about Owen Hart versus Bret Hart to kick off the Action Zone, and that must have worked for them because the ratings went up to a 2.0, which is not great, but for that time slot, it was up about 33% from the All-American show that aired before the Action Zone. So it seems like that all that advertisement for Owen versus Bret seemed to work out for them. Second note here. They mentioned the Shawn Michaels and Diesel match versus 1-2-3 Kid and Razor Ramon. And I think, Ryan, you talked about that when we were talking about the Jerry Curl, stepping up his Jerry Curl game. Dave Meltzer jerked off hard to that match. He gave it 4.5 stars and thought it was the best WWF TV match in over a year. Like he's coming day and night over this thing. So maybe I didn't do my homework. I didn't look for it. So maybe I might do that later. See if I can find that.
See if you can come for days and days.
Coming day and night. And Jimmy Del Rey, Meltzer is saying that Jimmy Del Rey, he blew out his knee doing a moonsault at a house show.
Jesus Christ.
On October 28th. But I feel like that might be fake news because I do believe Jimmy Del Rey did participate in the Survivor Series, but I could be wrong. We'll find out when we get there. But apparently he did injure himself doing a moonsault, which is interesting because I think last week or 2 weeks ago, we thought that his moonsault was looking pretty sloppy.
So maybe the jobber caused it.
It's possible.
That's the history that he has. Even though we like to joke about he broke his pelvis plowing broads, he did it. He broke his pelvis in a moonsault because the jobber was out of position. And then last week, or the week before, I'm sorry, I can't remember which, in the match that he was in, he did another moonsault, but the jobber was out of position and he almost smeared his face across the fucking ring. You would think that he would stop.
Well, he hasn't. He's down for the count again. The last note here, Dave Meltzer hates the constant knocking of the NFL pregame shows. He thinks it's petty and Bush League.
He's not wrong.
He said it makes them seem Bush League and only reminds viewers about what is on the other channels. So, yeah, he really hates it. It doesn't bother me as much as when they were doing the 900 number. I thought that was stupid, and
that was Bush League. I agree.
Yeah. But he really hates that. He hated that, but he really hates this too. So that's all I have right now. Hopefully, like I said, next week we'll have some news on Macho Man,
and hopefully we'll get some news on the broad plowing status of Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey. So that's it, folks. We are done with this one. I want to thank you again for joining us. And if you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit by searching up the handle Wrasslin Raw. That's WRASSLINRAW. Also, don't forget to click subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw popping up in your podcast feed. Let us know what you think. Hit us with a 5-star review or 4 3/4 if you're Dave Meltzer, wherever you download your podcasts. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to get into the Raw that aired on November 7th, 1994, with matches featuring Owen Hart and Pat Tanaka, among others. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.